Hey guys, today we're going to be learning about due process, and that's a phrase we've been using a lot in civics class today, this year, but today we're going to get a little bit more detailed. It might be a little bit of a review, but it is so important as one of our rights as Americans, as people who live in this country, whether you're a citizen or not, you are entitled to due process. So the first question is, what is due process? And our definition, which we should be writing down on our note sheet right now, is the right to be treated fairly by the government. It's kind of as simple as that every person who lives in the United States has the right to be treated fairly by our government. There are two parts to due process, though, and the first type, or the first part of due process, has to do with procedures. So again, write this down. Procedures or methods used to conduct hearings, to apply and enforce the laws must be fair and reasonable. So that means that the way things are done needs to be done the same way for every person, no matter how much money they have, no matter how, their citizenship status, no matter what religion they are, no matter what, everybody needs to be treated fairly, and they need to have the same process. And today we're going to be learning about the criminal case procedures, and that's part of due process, that everybody has to have the same process for that to be fair. So the procedures or methods used need to be fair. The second type is the content. So the second type of due process says that the content of laws that legislatures pass must be fair and reasonable. No unfair limitations on people's right to life, liberty, and property, and happiness. The reason that phrase is messed up a little bit is, as we know from the Declaration of Independence, it says life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But in the Constitution, it says life, liberty, and property. Either way, there cannot be any laws that restrict that unfairly. Our very common example of that is Jim Crow laws. Jim Crow laws were a violation of due process because they were treating the content of the laws itself were unfair. It was not fair to say that there could be segregation of schools. That was not a fair law. So that was a violation of due process. So that's so where do we find these in the Constitution? Our due process amendments are the 5th and the 14th. The 5th Amendment says no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. There it is, right there in the 5th Amendment. And this applies to the federal or national government. Okay, so this is saying that the 5th Amendment says that the national government has to treat you fairly. Our other big amendment in the due process amendment in the Constitution is the 14th Amendment. And the part of the 14th Amendment says, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property. So the 14th Amendment extends the 5th Amendment to the states, and again, it applies to state governments. So until after the Civil War, when the 14th Amendment was passed, it was a little bit unclear. If you lived in one state, you could have certain rights that you wouldn't have in another state. And the 14th Amendment makes it so that no matter what state you live in the United States, you need to be treated fairly. So 14th Amendment, due process by the state governments. But wait, due process really includes many protections from the Bill of Rights. The 4th Amendment kind of tells us how some of those procedures need to be done, part of due process. So the 4th Amendment says we have protection from unreasonable search and seizure without a warrant. In order to look in your car or your home, they need to have a search warrant that is issued by a magistrate. Remember, the magistrate is the judge that does those little tasks. Also, another part of the 5th Amendment, we know 5th Amendment is due process. 5th Amendment also says, in addition to due process, it's protection from testifying against yourself. They can't force you to testify against yourself. The 6th Amendment talks about due process rights in a trial. So the 6th Amendment says we have the right to a speedy and public trial by jury, the right to an attorney, which is another word for lawyer, and the right to confront or question the witnesses used against you. They can't keep, this part about speediness is that they can't keep you in jail forever without having the right to your day in court to try and prove your innocence. the way that that has been handled in general is that as long as the courts can prove that they are moving forward, that they're not just keeping you in there for no reason, that it usually goes with a speedy and public trial. It's important that it can be public so that the country can see, or anybody who wants to can look and see that the processes are being followed fairly, that nobody's being treated unfairly. You have the right to an attorney, then you have the right to question the witnesses used against you and to see who those are. Seventh Amendment says the right to a jury in civil trials. Please make sure you write in the word civil, C-I-V-I-L. That's what makes it different than their Sixth Amendment. Eighth Amendment is protection from cruel and unusual punishment, which includes excessive bail. So they can't put so much money on you that you can't get out of jail to go live your life, to work your job, to try and prove your case, whatever it is that you need to do, unless you are a flight risk or a danger to the community, in which case you can be held in jail. What happened there? Let's see. Was that the end? I don't think that was the end. All right, so that was our quick review of due process. The 5th and 14th are our main due process amendments, and then the other ones in between go along with that. Thank you for listening.